Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where you are invited to settle softly into the quiet and let the day loosen its hold on you. Tonight you will drift toward a small lakeside path where a row of red cabins rests beneath the gentle rhythm of summer rain. For now, there is nothing to solve, nothing to carry, nothing that needs your attention, more than the slow comfort of breathing in and breathing out. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands grow still. Let your face become calm as though a warm breeze has passed across it and taken with it the last traces of tension. Imagine the air after a long, golden afternoon when the heat has finally broken and rain begins to fall in silver threads. It taps on leaves, it gathers on pine needles, it slips from the eaves of wooden roofs and lands and darkened patches on the earth below. Somewhere, not far away, a lake receives each raindrop with a small, patient sound, a sound so quiet it seems to belong more to sleep than to waking. You may breathe as if the whole evening is breathing with you. Slowly in, slowly out. The rain does not hurry, the trees do not hurry, the lake does not hurry, and neither do you. As your thoughts become lighter, the story gently moves away from you, so you may rest without needing to follow too closely. It becomes the story of a traveler named Mara, who came at the soft end of a summer day to a quiet shore where the red cabins waited in the rain. Mara had been walking since the afternoon shadows were short beneath the birches, but now the sky had deepened into a blue-gray hush, and the clouds lowered kindly over the forest. She carried no heavy burden, only a small canvas bag and a wool shawl folded beneath her arm, though the season was warm. She'd always liked to bring a shawl wherever she went, because evenings near lakes could turn cool without warning, and because there was comfort in having something soft to gather around her shoulders. The path beneath her boots was made of packed earth and old pine needles. Rain had darkened it to the color of tea, and small puddles reflected slivers of sky between the trees. Ferns leaned over the edges of the trail, their green fronds bright and refreshed, each leaf jeweled with water. The scent of damp bark rose all around her, mingled with the sweetness of grass and the faint mineral breath of the lake. Ahead, between the trunks, she saw them at last. The row of red cabins. They stood side by side along the curve of the shore, not crowded, not far apart, each turned slightly toward the water as though listening. Their red paint was deep and soft in the rain, the color of berries and shade, the color of old barns remembered from childhood, the color of warmth kept safe behind wooden walls. Each cabin had a small porch, a sloped roof, and a window glowing faintly with amber light. Smoke lifted in lazy ribbons from a few chimneys, dissolving almost at once into the low mist. Mara paused at the edge of the clearing and simply looked. The rain fell gently across the scene, not as a storm, but as a blessing. It softened every outline. It blurred the far shore into a dream of pines and pale stone. lake shimmer with 1,000 small circles that appeared and faded, appeared and faded, as if the water were remembering something peaceful. A narrow boardwalk ran in front of the cabins, raised just above the sandy ground. On the posts along the walkway hung small lanterns with cloudy glass, each giving a modest golden glow. The light did not try to push away the evening. It only made a place within it, a small harbor for the eyes. Mara stepped onto the boardwalk, and the wet boards gave a low, friendly creak. The sound moved beneath the rain like a quiet greeting. She walked slowly, passing the first cabin, then the next, reading the carved wooden signs by their doors. They had names instead of numbers: moss, lark, thistle, juniper, willow, ember. The last cabin in the row bore the name Rowan, and beneath the name hung a sprig of leaves tied with faded twine. That was the cabin meant for her. Its porch was small, with a rocking chair set beside a clay pot of lavender. The lavender had bowed under the rain, and the wet purple blossoms gave off a clean, sleepy fragrance. A brass key rested where she had been told it would be, beneath a smooth river stone on the windowsill. The stone was cool in her palm. The key turned easily in the lock. Inside the cabin was simple and welcoming. A lamp glowed on a wooden table. A braided rug lay near the door. There was a small hearth, not burning yet, but laid carefully with kindling. Beside it stood a basket of dry birch logs, pale and smooth as moonlight. The bed was tucked beneath a sloping wall, covered with a quilt stitched in soft squares of cream, green, and faded red. A window above the bed looked out toward the lake, where rain traced slow lines down the glass. Mara set down her bag. She removed her boots and placed them neatly by the door. Her socks were warm and dry, and the floorboards felt smooth beneath her feet. She moved through the room without haste, touching the back of a chair, the edge of the table, the folded towel waiting near a small basin. Everything seemed to have been prepared by someone who understood quiet. On the table lay a folded note. It welcomed her to Rowan Cabin and invited her to take tea from the tin on the shelf. It said the rain was expected to last through the evening and perhaps into the night. It said that the lake was kind in summer rain and that she might enjoy listening to it from the porch. The note was signed by the caretaker, whose name was Elspeth. Mara smiled at the thought of someone knowing that rain could be a companion. She filled the kettle from a blue enamel pitcher and set it on the small iron stove. Soon the water began to murmur. While it warmed, she lit the hearth, coaxing a flame from the dry kindling with a match that flared briefly and warmly in her hand. The little fire took hold, not with a crackle of urgency, but with the slow confidence of something pleased to be alive. The kettle began to sing. Mara made tea from leaves that smelled of mint, chamomile, and a faint hint of wild honey. She held the cup in both hands and carried it to the porch, wrapping the shawl around her shoulders. Outside, the rain had become softer, almost a mist, but the roof still gathered it and let it fall from the eaves in steady drops. The rocking chair welcomed her with a gentle sway. From there she could see the entire row of cabins. Each cabin rested under its own veil of rain. Each window glowed differently. In some, the lamplight was golden and still. In others, it flickered from a small fire inside. The reflection stretched across the wet boardwalk and trembled in the puddles. Beyond the cabins, the forest stood calm and dark. And beyond the forest, hidden by mist, the hills leaned like sleeping animals against the sky. There were other guests in the cabins, though Mara saw them only in quiet glimpses. A woman in a blue cardigan stepped out from Willow Cabin to hang a raincoat on a peg. An older man in a soft cap carried an armful of split wood into Juniper. Near Moss Cabin, a child placed a paper boat into a puddle and watched it turn slowly beneath the lantern glow before being called back indoors by a gentle voice. No one hurried. No one spoke loudly. The rain seemed to have made an agreement with everyone who had come to the shore. All sounds would be softened. All movements would be untroubled. All thoughts would be allowed to loosen like knots in wet rope. Mara drank her tea in small sips, tasting warmth and flowers. The day of walking moved out of her legs. The space between her thoughts widened. She watched the lake receive the rain, and after a while she noticed a narrow dock, not far from the cabins, extending into the water between two clusters of reeds. At the end of the dock stood a single lantern, unlit. When her cup was empty, she set it on the small table beside the chair. The rain had become no more than a whisper. Mara felt no need to remain indoors. And so she slipped her feet back into her boots, pulled the shawl more closely around her, and walked down the porch steps to the boardwalk. The lanterns along the boardwalk shone in a gentle line, each light reflected below. The cabins seemed even redder in the wet evening, as if the rain had awakened their color. Mara moved past them slowly, hearing from inside the muffled signs of comfort, a page turning, a log settling in a stove, the low hum of someone singing to themselves, not for performance but for peace. At the end of the row, the boardwalk became a path of flat stones leading toward the dock. The grass around the stones was long and rain-bright, brushing softly against her skirt. Fireflies had begun to appear above the reeds, their small green lamps blinking in and out, with the unhurried rhythm of breathing. Mara stepped onto the dock. The wet planks were dark beneath her feet. The lake lay on either side, not black, but a deep blue mixed with silver. The rain had nearly stopped, though drops still fell from the pines and touched the water here and there. At the far end of the dock, the unlit lantern waited. Mara looked at it for a moment and wondered who would come to light it. Then she heard footsteps behind her, soft on the damp wood. An elderly woman approached, wearing a hooded rain cloak the color of moss. Her hair, where it showed, was white and loosely braided. In one hand she carried a small box of matches. In the other she held a glass jar full of pale blossoms. The woman smiled. She asked Mara if Rowan Cabin was comfortable, and Mara knew at once that this was Elspeth, the caretaker. Her voice had the quiet grain of old wood and the warmth of a kitchen lamp. Mara said the cabin was more than comfortable. It felt as though it had been waiting for her. Elspeth seemed pleased by this. She set the jar of blossoms beside the lantern and opened the little door of the glass. With careful hands, she struck a match and lit the wick. The flame took slowly at first, then brightened, filling the lantern with gold. The light spread over the wet dock, over the jar of flowers, over Mara's hands resting at her sides. The blossoms in the jar were white with yellow centers, and their petals were beaded with rain. Elspeth explained that they were evening flowers from the meadow behind the cabins. They opened more fully when the air cooled. She liked to bring them to the dock after rain because their scent drifted well over water. Mara leaned closer. The fragrance was faint but lovely, like warm hay, vanilla, and something green beneath moonlight. Together, the two women stood at the end of the dock and watched the lake. After a while, Elspeth spoke of the cabins. They had been built long ago by families who came each summer to fish, to gather berries, to mend nets, and to rest beside the water after long seasons of work. Every year they painted the cabins the same red, not too bright, not too dark, a color that could be found through fog, a color that looked warm in rain, a color that reminded the heart of shelter. Mara listened. The story did not require much from her. It unfolded at the same pace as the lake, slow and widening. Elspeth said that people often arrived at the cabins carrying more than their bags. Some came with tired minds. Some came after changes they had not asked for. Some came simply because they had forgotten how to be still. And yet, after a few evenings of rain on the roofs, tea in the cabins, and walks along the boardwalk, most people began to remember. Remember what? Mara asked. Elspeth looked across the water where mist was rising in pale folds. How to belong to the moment they were in, she said. The words settled gently around Mara. She did not answer. The lantern flame shifted behind glass. Somewhere near the reeds, a frog gave a soft, rounded note, then another. The sound seemed to come from the very edge of dreaming. Elspeth lifted the jar of flowers again and said she would leave Mara to the evening. Before she turned back, she pointed to the far side of the lake, where the mist was thickest. Through it, Mara could just make out a faint glimmer. Not a cabin, not a house, but perhaps a lantern among the trees. There is an old path over there, Elspeth said. It is too dark for walking tonight, but in clear weather it leads to a meadow of wild strawberries. The rain makes them sweet. Then she returned along the dock, her cloak moving softly behind her until she disappeared between the red cabins and their golden windows. Mara remained a little longer by the lantern. She thought of wild strawberries hidden in wet grass. She thought of people arriving weary and remembering how to belong. She thought of the row of red cabins, steady and bright, holding their places between forest and water. At last, the rain began again. so lightly that it could barely be called rain. It touched her hair and shawl with coolness. She turned back. The cabins looked even more dreamlike from the dock. Each roof shone, each porch glimmered. The red walls seemed to breathe out warmth into the blue dusk. Mara walked slowly without wishing to arrive any sooner than she did. Back in Rowan Cabin, the fire had settled into a quiet glow. The teacup still held a little warmth when she picked it up. She poured the last swallow and sat by the hearth, listening as rain gathered again on the roof. It began as scattered taps, then became a fuller sound, a soft, even patter that wrapped the cabin in closeness. She opened her bag and took out a small book, but after a page or so she found that her eyes preferred the flames. She closed the book and let it rest in her lap. The fire made small caves of light between the logs. Shadows moved gently over the walls. The kettle, cooling on the stove, gave an occasional tiny click. Outside, the rain strengthened, but it never became harsh. It came in layers: roof rain, leaf rain, lake rain, rain from the eaves, rain in the grass, rain slipping down the window. Each layer had its own voice, and together they made a music so complete that nothing else was needed. Mara rose to prepare for sleep. She washed her face with cool water from the basin. She brushed her hair slowly. She unfolded the quilt and found the sheets beneath it clean and faintly scented with sun, as if they had dried outside earlier in the day before the rain arrived. She added a small log to the fire, enough to keep the room warm while she drifted off, then lowered the lamp until its glow was dim and honey-colored. Before getting into bed, she went to the window. The row of cabins extended beyond her view, but she could see a few of them through the rain. Their windows glowed like quiet thoughts. On the boardwalk, lanterns swayed almost imperceptibly in the damp air. The puddles held small pieces of light. Beyond, the lake had nearly vanished into mist, but its presence could still be felt, wide and calm. Mara placed her hand against the cool window glass. She felt, without needing to explain it, that the night was complete. The rain was falling, the cabins were resting, the forest was drinking, the lake was listening. Nothing had to be different. She climbed into bed and drew the quilt over herself. The pillow was soft, the room warm, the window close enough that she could hear the rain sliding down the glass. She lay on her side and watched the firelight until her eyelids grew heavy. But before sleep arrived, her thoughts wandered gently back through the evening. She saw again the path of pine needles, the wet ferns, the red cabins appearing between the trees, the porch lavender bending under rain, the brass key beneath the river stone, the tea, the dock, the lantern at the lake's edge, Elspeth's voice saying that people remembered how to belong to the moment they were in. Mara breathed slowly. In the next cabin, someone moved softly across the floor. Then all was still. Farther down the row, a door closed with a muted wooden sound. Rain filled the spaces between each small noise, smoothing them, making them part of the night. She dreamed before she knew she was dreaming. In the dream, she was walking beside the lake in the pale morning after rain. The sky was washed clean, and the red cabins shone under beads of water. The boardwalk steamed lightly where sunlight touched it. Birds called from the birches, not loudly, but clearly, as though the whole world had woken refreshed. Elspeth was there, carrying a basket lined with a white cloth. She invited Mara to follow the old path around the lake, the path that led to the meadow of wild strawberries. They walked without speaking much, because the morning itself was speaking in every leaf and ripple. The path curved through pines, then over a small wooden bridge where a stream entered the lake. The stream was lively from the rain, tumbling over stones with silver laughter. On the far side, the forest opened into a meadow. Wild strawberries grew low among the grass, red and small and shining. Their leaves held droplets of water. The air smelled of earth, sweetness, and sun-warming wet flowers. Mara knelt and picked a berry, and when she tasted it, it was as sweet as Elspeth had promised. Not the bright sweetness of sugar, but the deep, quiet sweetness of summer, gathered slowly. In the dream, other guests from the cabins arrived by the meadow path. The woman in the blue cardigan, the older man in the soft cap, the child with the paper boat. They moved through the meadow with baskets, smiling to one another, speaking in gentle voices. No one picked too much. No one disturbed the place. They gathered what the meadow offered and left the rest for birds, foxes, and whatever small hidden creatures moved beneath the grass. Then, as dreams do, the meadow changed without surprise. The rain returned, though the sun still shone. The drops fell bright and warm through the air, each one catching light. The red cabins appeared at the edge of the meadow, as if the whole row had drifted there across the lake without sound. Their doors stood open. From inside came the scent of tea and fresh bread. Lanterns glowed even though it was morning. Mara understood in the easy way one understands things in dreams, that each cabin held a room for a different kind of rest. Moss held the rest of green shade and quiet roots. Lark held the rest of open sky and distant song. Thistle held the rest of safety behind soft boundaries. Juniper held the rest of fragrant wood smoke. Willow held the rest of bending without breaking. Ember held the rest of warmth kept alive. And Rowan, her own cabin, held the rest of returning. She did not need to enter them all. It was enough to know they were there. The dream softened again. The meadow became the lake became the window became the gentle darkness of the cabin room. Mara slept deeply, and the summer rain continued its patient work, washing leaves, filling roots, smoothing stones, and singing on the roofs of the red cabins. Through the night, the row of cabins rested. Rainwater slid from the eaves into barrels with soft, hollow sounds. The boardwalk shone under lantern light. The lavender on Mara's porch lifted and dipped in the breeze. In the forest, the trunks of the pines were dark and still. Beneath fallen leaves, tiny beetles moved through their secret tunnels. Under the cabin roofs, travelers slept, each wrapped in their own quiet dreams, each held by the same rain. The lake received everything. It received the rain, it received the reflections, it received the hush of the hills and the low mist that wandered down from the trees. It received the warm glow of windows and turned them into wavering paths of gold across its surface. It received the breath of sleeping people and the scent of wet cedar and the soft settling of night. And all of it belonged. Near dawn, the rain thinned. It became a whisper again, then a memory. The clouds remained low, but the darkness began to loosen. The world turned from black to blue, from blue to pearl, from pearl to pale silver. Mara slept on. The fire had become a bed of quiet ash, with only a few red points deep within it. The quilt rose and fell with her breathing. Her face was peaceful. The cabin held her gently, as it had held many travelers before her and would hold many after. Outside, Elspeth walked the boardwalk in the early hush, carrying a small broom made of bound twigs. She brushed rainwater from the porch steps of each cabin, moving slowly, careful not to wake anyone. When she reached Rowan, she paused and looked toward the window. Seeing only stillness, she smiled and continued on. The morning would come when it was ready. There would be tea. There would be bread warm from the caretaker's oven. There would be the smell of wet grass, and perhaps later, a walk to the meadow. There would be the red cabins in soft daylight, their walls bright after rain, their porches clean, their windows open to the lake breeze. But not yet. For now there was only rest. Mara slept beneath the quilt. The cabins rested beside the water. The forest stood watch without effort. The lake lay calm beneath the passing mist. And now the story becomes quieter. The rain has softened. The lanterns have dimmed. The red cabins are safe and still. Breath by breath, the evening settles deeper. The lake grows smooth. The trees grow quiet. The little porch waits in peace. The bed is warm. The quilt is soft. Nothing is needed now. Let the rain be distant. Let the cabins fade. Let the shore become a dream. There is only this gentle darkness, this calm, this slow and easy rest. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.